So hello everyone. Our today's topic is the regulation of the respiration. The respiration it is a reflex process. It can be controlled voluntarily for short period of about 40 seconds. But however, by practice, we can withhold the respiration for a longer period. And at the end of that period, the person is forced to breathe. Normally, the quiet or regular breathing it occurs because of the two regulatory mechanism, the nervous mechanism or the chemical mechanism. The nervous mechanism that regulates the respiration, there are three: respiratory center, afferent nerves, and the efferent nerves. Now, what are the respiratory centers? The respiratory centers, they are group of the neurons. They will control three things: the rate of respiration, the rhythm of respiration, and the force of respiration. So where these respiratory centers they are located? They are situated in the brainstem bilaterally. So based upon their location, their situation in the brainstem, they are classified into two groups: the medullary centers and the pontine centers. The medullary centers they consist of dorsal respiratory group of neurons and the ventral respiratory group of neurons, whereas the pontine center will have are the apneustic centers and mnemotaxic centers. Now let us check where they are located. Suppose this one is the figure of the showing the brainstem. So these here are the dorsal group of neurons. So they are situated in the medulla. So we have two groups of neurons. One is the dorsal group of neurons and the other is the ventral group of neurons. Similarly, in the pons, we have two groups of neurons. One is the apneustic center. So in the pons, we have two centers. One is the apneustic center and other is mnemotaxic center. So this dorsal respiratory group of neurons, where it is situated? It is situated in the nucleus of tractus solitarius, in the upper part of the medulla oblongata. So in the upper part of medulla oblongata, the nucleus of tractus solitarius, the dorsal respiratory groups of neurons are present. So there, all the neurons of the dorsal respiratory groups, they are inspiratory neurons. So these dorsal group of neurons, they are responsible for the basic rhythm of respiration. The second part is the ventral respiratory group of neurons. So where are they? Where are the ventral group of neurons located? They are present in the nucleus ambiguous. The ventral group of neurons, they are situated in the medulla oblongata, anterior and the lateral to the nucleus of tractus solitarius. So they are also known as expiratory center. Remember, the ventral respiratory group of neurons, they have both the inspiratory and the expiratory neurons. These ventral group of neurons, they are inactive during the quiet breathing, but it become active during the forced breathing. And during the forced breathing, these neurons will stimulate both the inspiratory muscles as well as the expiratory muscles. Other is the apneustic center. So in the pons, you will see two centers. One is the apneustic center and other is pneumotaxic center. So the apneustic center, it is situated in the reticular formation of the lower pons. Lower pons, apneustic center. So what is the function of this apneustic center? It will increase the depth of respiration by directly acting on the dorsal group neurons. So the apneustic center will increase the depth of inspiration. What is apneusis? Apneusis is somewhat a abnormal pattern of the respiration that is characterized by prolonged inspiration and short, inefficient expiration. The fourth is pneumotaxic center. The pneumotaxic center, it is situated in the dorsolateral part of the reticular formation in the upper pons. So what is the function of pneumotaxic center? It controls the medullary respiratory centers, particularly the dorsal group neurons. So the pneumotaxic center, it acts through the apneustic center. The pneumotaxic center, it inhibits the apneustic center so that the dorsal group neurons, they are inhibited. So because of this, the inspiration will stop and expiration will start. So this center will influence the switching between, it has a switch between the inspiration and expiration. So this pneumotaxic center increases the respiratory rate by reducing the duration of the inspiration. Other is the afferent pathway. Here, the nerve fibers from the respiratory center, they will leave the brainstem. So the nerve fiber from the respiratory center leave the brainstem and it slowly descend into the anterior part of the lateral column of the spinal cord. So from the motor neurons of the spinal cord, two sets of the nerve fibers arise. One are the phrenic nerve. The phrenic nerve fibers will supply the respiratory muscles of the diaphragm that will cause the contraction of the diaphragm, lung contraction that would result in the chest wall or the lung contraction. Other is the intercostal nerve fibers that supply the external intercostal muscles. Also remember, vagus nerve also contains some afferent fibers from the respiratory centers. Other is the afferent pathway. So what are the afferent pathway? The respiratory centers will receive the afferent impulses from the number one, the chemoreceptor and the baroreceptor from the branches of the glossopharyngeal and the vagus nerve. And second is the stretch receptor of the lungs via the vagus nerve. So that will result in the movement of the thoracic cage and the lungs. Now, what is the role of the medullary centers? In the medullary center, we had two group of neurons. One are the dorsal and other is the ventral. The dorsal respiratory groups, they are responsible for normal rhythm of respiration. So they maintain the normal rhythm of respiration. What is the role of the pontine centers? The pontine centers regulate the medullary centers. The apneutic center will accelerate the activity of the dorsal group of neurons, and stimulation of this center causes prolonged inspiration, whereas the pneumotaxic center inhibit the apneustic center and it restricts the duration of the inspiration. What is the additional respiratory center? The additional respiratory center is the pre-Bodensinger complex. So remember it is also known as pacemaker neuron. It is situated where? In the ventrolateral part of the medulla. So this pacemaker neuron will generate the rhythmic respiratory impulses. So for exam view, you have to remember the pre-Potzinger reflex is the pacemaker neuron. So what are the other factors that will affect these respiratory centers? So higher centers, impulses from the higher centers alter the respiration by sending the impulse directly to the dorsal group of neurons. What are the higher centers? They could be anterior cingulate gyrus, genu of corpus callosum. So they will inhibit the respiration. Whereas the impulses from the motor area and sylvian area of the cerebral cortex, it will cause forced breathing. Important is the Hering-Breuer reflex. What is Hering-Breuer reflex? Hering-Breuer reflex, it is a protective reflex. It restricts the inspiration and prevents the overstretching of the lung tissue. So it is initiated. How it is initiated? By the stimulation of the stretch receptor of the air passage. So when the lungs expand during the inspiration, that stimulates the stretch receptor. So impulses from the stretch receptor will reach the dorsal group neurons via the vagal afferent fibers and inhibit them. So the inspiration stops, and after that the expiration starts. And that is how the overstretching of the lungs tissue is prevented. Remember the Hering-Breuer reflex, it does not operate during quiet breathing. It operates when the tidal volume reaches beyond 1000 ml. So this Hering-Breuer reflex will prevent the overstretching of the lung tissue. Other are the impulses from the J receptor of the lung. The J receptors are what are the J receptors? They are juxtacapillary receptor. They are present on the wall of the alveoli and they have a close contact with the pulmonary capillaries. So this stimulation of the J receptor would be characterized by apnea. So condition when J receptors are stimulated is when there is inflation of lungs, pneumonia, pulmonary edema, pulmonary congestion. So the stimulation of the J receptor would causes a reflex increase in the breathing rate, and they are involved in the sensation of dyspnea, that is the difficult breathing. So the reflex response that is produced is apnea followed by the rapid breathing, that is bradycardia occurs, there is hypotension. So these receptors, they have been found in the wall of bronchi, larynx and the nose. Baroreceptors, they are the receptors that give response to change in the blood pressure. So the baroreceptor found in the carotid sinus and arch of aorta will cause increase in the blood pressure. So when the blood pressure would increase, the baroreceptors, they get activated. So they would send impulses to the centers in the medulla oblongata. They would send inhibitory impulses. So that causes the decrease in blood pressure and there is inhibition of the inspiration. Let us discuss the chemical mechanism The chemical mechanism of regulation of respiration, it is operated through the chemoreceptors. So the chemoreceptors means they are the sensory nerve endings that responds to the change in the chemical constituents of the blood. So what are the changes in the chemical constituent of blood that stimulates the chemoreceptor? 3 changes: hypoxia, hypercapnia, and increase hydrogen concentration. Hypoxia means decrease in the partial pressure of oxygen. Hypercapnia is increase in the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide. And third is the increased hydrogen ion concentration. So there are 2 types of receptors, central acting and peripheral acting. The central chemoreceptors, they are present in brain, in the deeper part of the medulla oblongata, close to the dorsal respiratory group of neurons. So these chemoreceptors, they are contact with the blood and the cerebrospinal fluid. So what happens is what is the main stimulant for the central chemoreceptor? The main stimulant for the central chemoreceptor is increase in the hydrogen ion concentration. So when the hydrogen ion concentration increases in the blood, it cannot stimulate the central chemoreceptor, as the hydrogen ion which they are present in the blood, they cannot cross the blood-brain barrier and the blood cerebrospinal fluid barrier. On the other hand, if the carbon dioxide concentration increases in the blood, it can easily cross the blood-brain barrier and the blood cerebrospinal fluid barrier, and they can enter the brain or the cerebrospinal fluid. So the carbon dioxide will combine with the water to form carbonic acid. The carbonic acid is itself unstable and it get dissociate into hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. So the hydrogen ion, they will stimulate the central chemoreceptors. So the excitatory impulses, they will be sent to the dorsal respiratory group of neurons. So what dorsal respiratory group of neurons will do? They will increase the rate and the force of breathing. So the excessive carbon dioxide, it is washed out and the respiration, it is brought back to the normal. Other are the peripheral chemoreceptors. They are present in the carotid and aortic region. So what is the main stimulant for the peripheral chemoreceptor? It is hypoxia. Hypoxia is the most potent stimulant for the peripheral chemoreceptor, and for the central chemoreceptor, it was increased hydrogen ion concentration. So the hypoxia, it will cause closure of oxygen sensitive potassium channels, and it will prevent the potassium exit and the potassium efflux. So that leads to depolarization and generation of action potential. So the impulses, they pass through the hearing nerves and excite the dorsal group of neurons. So this dorsal group of neurons will send excitatory impulses to the respiratory muscles that results in increased ventilation and provide enough oxygen and rectify the lack of oxygen. Also remember, in addition to the hypoxia, the peripheral chemoreceptor, they are stimulated by hypercapnia and increased ion concentration. The sensitivity of hypercapnia and increased hydrogen concentration is mild,